In the United States, 18-year-olds are considered responsible enough to democratically elect our leaders, however, not responsible enough to consume alcohol. Doesn't this seem strange? As community college students, most of us fall in between the gray area ages of 18 to 21, where we have some freedoms but not complete freedom in the United States. I've done extensive research on domestic politics since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm currently a junior at the University of Illinois studying geology and geography. I've taken several political science courses and geographical political courses that have made me well versed on the topic. While I have never lived during a really calm political climate, my research has concluded that we are living in a very unusual time. I believe that the voting age in the United States should be raised to 21 for 3 reasons. First, the government doesn't trust 18-year-olds with some adult responsibilities, however, allows them to vote. Second, they are more informed because they're independent and have more life experience. Third, 21-year-olds are more mentally mature and developed than 16 or 18-year-olds. The first reason why the voting age should be raised to 21 is because the government doesn't trust 18-year-olds with adult responsibilities. In the United States, you're considered an adult at 18, and citizens are then granted the right to vote. There are many restrictions in place that are not lifted until you're 21, or in some cases, 25. The law suggests that you're unable to assume adult responsibility because of your lack of age and maturity. However, you can democratically elect your officials. You cannot buy alcohol, cigarettes, hotel rooms, or rent a car, but you can choose our elected officials. How does this make sense? According to the editors of the Healthy Children website, published on March 31st, 2021, raising the tobacco purchasing age would allow older high school students and young college students to buy for younger students. Basically, the government doesn't trust 18-year-olds because they might harm themselves or buy cigarettes for younger kids. So if the government doesn't trust 18-year-olds to, buy their own cigarettes and not give them to younger kids, then why do they think that they're responsible enough to vote? The laws in the United States are totally contrary to one another. Voting requires mental maturity. It influences the well-being of the nation. The policy of an immature, dependent 18-year-old can influence how a single mother works to feed her kids or a family of 4. On the other hand, buying cigarettes only harms the individual and not the society. Some suggest that we should lower these restrictions to 18 to match the voting age. However, I think we should raise the voting age to match these restrictions. In recent years, the legal threshold for restrictions has moved towards maturity. According to an article from Forbes, published by David Davenport on May 25th, 2016, states, "In fact, other legal age thresholds have been going up, not down. The drinking age is 21, and the age when kids may drive a car without any conditions has now increased to 17 or 18 by most state laws, not 16. In other words, the law has moved towards greater maturity before responsibility, not less." And I can kind of agree with one of these points where when I got my driver's license in Illinois at 16, I wasn't allowed to drive with more than one person in the car until I was 17 because having 5 16-year-olds in one car could lead to lots of irresponsible activities. This evidence supports the claim that it is hypocritical that 18-year-olds are deemed responsible enough to vote. Moving on to my second point. 21-year-olds are more informed because they are independent of their parents and have more life experience than 16 to 18-year-olds. 16 to 18-year-olds lack the independence and life experiences that 21-year-olds have. It's impossible to understand independent life as a dependent. According to Jessica Dickler at CNBC, published October 7th, 2019, in 1979, nearly 60% of American teenagers were employed, an all-time high. Today, just over 1/3 or 35% of teens between the ages of 16 and 19 are a part of that workforce. With an almost 50% drop in employment, they are delaying what it is like to live in the real world. If you completely rely on your parents' income, how can you choose taxes, foreign policy, domestic policy, for the entire nation. It doesn't really make sense. And in the United States, there's an increasing trend for young people to live with their parents, yet we still are giving them the right to vote at 18. 18-year-olds used to be more independent than they are now, and that's what those jobs numbers are reporting. However, according to Tara Law at Time Magazine on September 6, 2020, a majority of young Americans ages 18 to 29 are now living with at least one of their parents. Since the proportion of 18 to 19-year-olds living at home hit a low of 29% in 1960, the number has risen over the decades to almost 44% in 2010. There's a staggering increase in young adults living with their parents, which means there's a decrease in the amount of independence at that age. Less experience and less dependency, or less experience and more independency would lead to smarter voting and a greater nation. This evidence supports the claim that 21-year-olds are more informed because they're more independent than 18-year-olds, and it also shows that there's an increase in young adults living with their parents, which shows that young adults now are less independent than they used to be. I'll now move on to my third reason. I believe that the voting age in the United States should be raised to 21 because they are more mentally developed than 16 or 18-year-olds. Some suggest the United States should lower the voting age to 16, like in San Francisco. However, we should not lower the voting age because adolescents are completely reliant on their parents, subjected to government restrictions that imply they are unable to assume adult responsibilities, and they do not have life experiences and are not mentally developed. The human brain is not fully developed until 25. Before this, it is continually developing and maturing. However, in the United States, you can vote well before your brain is mentally developed. According to the National Institute of Health, published by Grace Eisenogel and other authors in February of 2019, in 2005, when the American Psychological Association submitted an amicus brief of Roper versus Simmons, the United States Supreme Court case that abolished the juvenile death penalty for 16 and 17-year-olds, the APA argued that people younger than 18 lacked psychological maturity necessary to be held fully responsible for their crimes, and therefore should not be eligible for capital punishment. And this was a direct quote. Basically, the American Psychological Society said 16-year-olds are not developed enough to face the death penalty, but some people think, because their brains aren't fully mentally mature, but some people think they should be able to vote. And this just seems ridiculous. Adolescents lack future orientation, impulse control, and are highly skewed by what their peers think. I personally witnessed this during 2020 when hundreds of people in my high school were all reposting the same Instagram infographics. Adults are much less likely to be influenced by this herd mentality because their brains are more mentally developed. In a psychological study conducted by Villanova University, published by Adam Kucharzek and other authors on October 24th, 2020, researchers found social media influences adolescents' food choices. And this just goes to show you that adolescents are much easier swindled by what their peers think than what adults are based on their mental maturity. This evidence supports the claim that voting age should be raised to 22 because 16 and 18-year-olds aren't mentally developed enough to vote. I'll now be moving on to my conclusion. In my speech, I explained why the voting age should be raised to 21 and not kept at 18. Some will say that we should lower the voting age to 16. However, this would negatively affect our institutions even more because teenagers are completely reliant on their parents. They're not mentally mature, they lack independence, and there are laws that assume they are unable to assume adult responsibilities. As you can see, there is a hypocritical set of standards in place in the United States. In some ways, 18-year-olds are responsible enough to buy alcohol, in some ways, 18-year-olds are responsible enough to make their own decisions, but in other ways, they are not. They aren't allowed to buy alcohol, but they're allowed to vote. We should raise the voting age to 21 and match the alcohol age and the cigarette age because we would benefit as a society with a more mature voting class. Thank you.